All right, so imagine this. A country's currency is absolutely cratering, markets are going haywire, and this huge radical economic experiment, it's right on the edge of collapsing. And then, out of nowhere, a possible lifeline appears from an old friend, an ally who has a, let's say, very different way of doing diplomacy. Today, we're going to dig into the super high-stakes financial deal between Javier Milei's Argentina and Donald Trump's US. And really, the biggest question on everyone's mind is, can this pact actually save the peso, or is it just kicking the can down the road?
Okay, so let's get right into it. To really get why Milei's plan is so, well, radical, you've got to understand the absolute mess he walked into. We're not talking about a few bad years here. We're talking about a century of economic chaos that took one of the richest countries in the world and just brought it to its knees.
You know, it's pretty hard to wrap your head around this now, but believe it or not, at the start of the 20th century, Argentina was one of the top 10 wealthiest nations on the entire planet. I mean, we're talking richer than France, richer than Germany. People from all over the world were flocking there for a better life. So this quote, it's just this powerful kind of tragic reminder of everything that's been lost. It's like a ghost from a golden age that just hangs over everything.
And this timeline, wow, it just lays out this brutal repeating pattern. It really kicks off in the 1940s with something called Peronism. Think of it as a system with huge state control, nationalized companies, and big social spending. Well, that created this cycle, right? Spend too much, borrow too much, and then boom, default on your debts. Again and again. That 2001 default was a massive shock to the whole world. And by the time Milei shows up, inflation is at a staggering 211%. This wasn't just a rough patch. The entire system was broken.
So yeah, this crisis didn't just happen by accident. It was basically a recipe for disaster, with a few key ingredients. First, you've got decades of government spending way more money than they actually had. Then, they protected these inefficient local businesses from any real competition. And the solution to pay for it all? Just fire up the printing presses and print more money. Of course, this just created a vicious cycle of more debt, more inflation, and pretty soon, nobody trusted the government or the currency at all.
So you're faced with this absolute historic disaster. What do? Well, Javier Milei didn't show up with a scalpel, he showed up with a chainsaw, proposing this really radical shock therapy to try and fix what seemed like an unfixable problem.
And honestly, you can pretty much sum up his whole approach with this quote. He completely rejected the old way of doing things, of making populist promises. Instead, he basically told the Argentine people, look, this is going to hurt, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It was a total break from the political style that had run the country for generations.
His plan, what everyone calls shock therapy, really boils down to four main things. First, go after the root of the problem, insane government spending. Second, take an axe to the massive bureaucracy. Third, open up the economy. Get rid of all the price controls and regulations. And fourth, the most important rule of all, balance the budget no matter what it takes.
And he wasn't kidding around. This wasn't just some abstract theory. The chainsaw was very real. More than 53,000 government jobs were eliminated. Entire ministries were shut down. Public projects were frozen. These were fast, deep cuts designed to send one crystal-clear message: the party's over.
So, the big question is, after all that pain, did any of it actually work? Well, let's take a look at the initial numbers, because the results were nothing short of dramatic.
The first huge win came really fast. For the first time in more than a decade, the Argentine government actually brought in more money than it spent, a fiscal surplus. This was a massive break from that old pattern of deficits that just fueled endless inflation. It was the absolute foundation of his entire plan.
Now, just like he warned, the shock therapy hurt at first. The economy went into a sharp recession. But then, something kind of amazing happened. The economy didn't just crawl back, it shot back, way faster than anyone expected. It formed this classic V-shaped recovery. You could almost feel investor confidence starting to come back.
But, and this is a really big but, that recovery was not being felt everywhere, not by a long shot. That V-shape was really being driven by just a couple of things. Agriculture, for example, once it was freed from all these taxes and controls, it just exploded. But other big parts of the economy, like construction and industry, they were still in a deep hole. So yeah, a recovery, but a very lopsided one. But right as the economic numbers were starting to look good, bam, a political earthquake. Milei's coalition got hammered in the key Buenos Aires city elections, and suddenly serious doubts started creeping in about whether he could actually get his long-term reforms passed. The markets panicked,
the peso started to slide again, and the whole experiment was suddenly at risk. Milei needed to find some powerful new friends, and fast.
So to understand the deal that happened next, you really have to get Donald Trump's very unique way of looking at foreign policy. It's not about tradition or long-term alliances. It's much more like a business deal. He likes one-on-one transactional agreements where the main question is always, what do we get out of it? It's a CEO approach that's all about leverage, personal chemistry, and getting a clear win.
So you've got these two leaders who both see themselves as outsiders, right? Shaking up the establishment. And that ideological connection really opened the door for a massive financial pact. Just as that political uncertainty in Argentina was threatening to undo all the progress, the Trump administration threw them a lifeline. Now, the centerpiece of this deal is something called a currency swap line. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. The U.S. central bank, the Fed, agrees to temporarily trade U.S. dollars for Argentine pesos. Then, down the road, they swap back at the exact same exchange rate. What this does is it gives Argentina a huge pile of dollars to defend its currency and calm down the markets, all without taking on new debt. It's a powerful financial backstop.
So let's break down what's actually in this deal. The big headline number is a $20 billion swap line. But there's more. The U.S. also agreed to directly buy pesos to pump more dollars into the system, and maybe even buy up some Argentine government bonds. But in true transactional fashion, this help isn't free. It comes with some serious strings attached. Argentina has to promise to go even further with its reforms. And this is just a textbook example of that transactional diplomacy. You can see exactly what each side gets. Argentina gets the stability it desperately needs to keep this whole economic project from blowing up. And for the U.S., it's a huge strategic win. It shores up a key ideological ally in Latin America, pushes back against rivals like China, and it serves as a big, shiny example of a pro-market agenda succeeding.
But here's the thing. Even with a powerful friend like the U.S. and billions of dollars in backup, Milei's biggest challenges are still at home. The really tough fights are still ahead. Milei's greatest weakness, by far, is political. His party has a tiny number of seats in Congress, and the opposition, the Peronistas, they control it, and they are dead set on stopping him. He's been ruling mostly by presidential decree, but for the big, permanent changes, you need to pass laws, and right now, he just doesn't have the votes to do it.
And all this austerity has a very real human price tag. While the big picture economy might be showing green shoots, this chart tells a different story. It shows that for the average family, their actual take-home pay, what's left after all the bills, has collapsed and it's not recovering. That creates enormous social pressure and, you guessed it, gives the political opposition a powerful weapon to use against him. Which brings us to a really interesting critique, and it often comes from the very same economic school of thought that Milei himself follows. The argument is that a foreign bailout, even a friendly one, doesn't actually fix the root problems. A currency swap is like a painkiller. It makes you feel better for a little while, but it doesn't cure the disease. The only way to truly fix Argentina, they say, is to finish the job of radically shrinking the state and creating sound money, not by leaning on an outside crutch. And that really is the heart of the matter, isn't it? Is this pact the critical lifeline that buys Milei's radical experiment enough time to actually work? Or is it just another foreign bailout that papers over the deep cracks in the system, delaying the inevitable, and maybe even continuing Argentina's tragic cycle of crisis? The answer to that question is going to shape the future of an entire nation.